you have to have the desire to answer your own questions first. So like the desire to answer my own questions first with the data that I had access to, like gave me the end goal to learn how to do all of it.
Trevor Abshire, sports science analyst for the Cleveland Guardians. Welcome to the pod. Your mustache looks just as majestic as I thought it would. I hoped it would in your LinkedIn profile picture. Thanks for joining. How are you doing today? And tell me something good that's going on in your life.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Matt. I'm trying my best with the mustache, seeing what the optimal length is. Doing good today, having a good cup of coffee and sitting down talking shop with a presence on LinkedIn, which is awesome. Um, Some going on well today for me. I'm in San Diego, California right now, and it's like a weekly desire for me to have a California burrito. So I get to go and sample all the taco shops and burrito shops that I didn't get to the past 3 years since I've been gone, but excited to go crush those and hang out on the sand.
I'm sure the Latin food scene is not as good in Cleveland, Ohio, as it is in California.
Chipotle, not quite, but you know what you're getting.
Yeah, for sure. So, are you originally from California?
Yeah, born in Oregon, but left when I was 2 or 3. My parents took us out to Palm Springs, California,
Gotcha.
from about 3 to 18 years old. We were there playing baseball for a lot of those years, and then was fortunate enough to go to Point Loma Nazarene for undergrad and grad, and continue playing baseball out there.
So, college baseball guy, Point Loma, then worked at UC Davis, which is our connection. Mike Sullivan, hashtag move the needle. They can't sue me. It's not copyrighted, I don't think. But if it is, I'll chop that out of the podcast. And then he connected us because Trevor made the jump from being on the floor coaching into a full-time sports science role. So that was kind of the connection between us. Super nice guy. I think we chatted for like an hour and a half. I'm sure we could have kept going. Same thing with me almost derailing our whole podcast today by just chopping it up about all things data and sports science and stuff. But super nice guy, super cool journey. And now in this role with the Cleveland Guardians. So I'm super excited to kind of just to hear that journey in general, what it's like kind of making that plunge. Um, but a baseball guy through and through. So, Fit is an online programming software that helps you train more athletes in less time with greater individualization. For in person or remote training, Fit does so with a streamlined programming process, decision making trees to help you integrate data into your programming, as well as better communication with all pieces of a high performance model involved to break down silos. Learn more at fit.io. That's fytt.io. And tell them that Matt Tometz sent you. I guess we will get into it. So, what is the kind of first fork in the road moment? Kind of biggest thing that looking back, you're like, oh my gosh, if that had like gone left instead of right, kind of this would all be super, super different.
Yeah, yeah. It's really cool to like go back and reflect on that because there's plenty of forks. There's plenty of forks. To give as much background as possible, I talked about it briefly, but I did my kinesiology undergrad at Point Loma Nazarene, and my master's at Point Loma Nazarene as well, and just like so much appreciation for that athletics department and that academics department. There's like so many cool mentors and so many people that encourage me to follow this path. I mean, like we had so many cool resources and just really, really valuable community to be a part of. And I appreciate all the people that helped me there. Um, yeah, I was doing S&C at Point Loma and got to dabble in sports science. Like I felt like my passions were leaning towards that. We had Hawkins Dynamics force plates, and we were doing. I was attempting to do my version of jump monitoring with all my teams there. So I got to start that, and then I just had questions that it felt like I wasn't able to answer myself, or like the community around me was saying, "Hey, you kind of have to do this on your own because you're a professional and you got to go and figure out these avenues." So I was like, "Dang." And went and found ways to go and continue that education on the computer science side of things. Um, but ultimately, the forks for me were interviewing for a lot of strength and conditioning jobs, um, whether that's in the NCAA, the professional baseball, or the private sector. There was a point in time where I was a 30-second decision away from packing up my bags and going to the Dominican Republic to be a strength coach out there for a team.
30
Um,
seconds away. Tell me about that.
yeah, it was really tough. Like I was holding on to the phone call, like heart was racing because my dream was to be in pro baseball, and there was a lot of factors that were into consideration, but like it felt like a coin flip because I could pull it off one way or another, but it just something in my gut told me like I can't be doing this. Um, so a fork there. Ended up taking the job at UC Davis. And it was just amazing to be a part of a football program there that was just so well orchestrated. And it was just so impressive for me to see that side of athletic development. So that was real valuable for me. And then the weight of the industry, being a strength and conditioning coach at that level, started to take its toll on me, and a bunch of forks just started popping up for me. I mean, I was very close to going to the private sector. I was very close to completely changing career trajectories and enrolling as an X-ray technician. Like that is so far out of left field for me, but like
Big
I
pivot.
was I was my candle was at its end, so I was exploring a bunch of different opportunities. So thankfully and just so amazingly, I was able to get this opportunity in a professional baseball where I spent most of my life and heart and love and appreciation for B in human performance, which like I feel really passionate about and I want to educate people about. And um, C, I get to work on a computer and mess with Excel files and look at data and make graphs. Like I tell people that they ask me how my first season was. I go, hey, like this is a trifecta for me. Like I absolutely love this. So ultimately, that last fork in the road led me to this, and it's just been so amazing. And I'm learning something every day, and it's really cool to be around a bunch of passionate individuals that just want to get after it, win championships, and like take care of these ball players.
I totally agree with when you first dive into performance training, coaching, all those things, and then you're like, oh, cool, I can collect data on this. And then you're like, I have
Right.
this question, but I don't know what to do about it.
Yeah.
It's like I have all of the context and I have all of the data, but like just actually turning into reality. And um, so how many years ago was that kind of that's when you were GA at Point Loma?
Yeah. So that would be somewhere between 2019 and 2021. That pandemic year was a little goofy, but data collection in 19 and data collection in 21.
Yeah, the field of sports science from way back when. I finished my master's in May 2020, so that was basically COVID, and then I was like full time at TC Boost. I was
Yeah.
our sports science coordinator, and it's just so funny how like being like good at Excel versus like now it's like, oh yeah, you have to have a master's in kinesiology and a master's in computer science, and you have to have also it's like it's come super, super far. But it's interesting to reflect back on like what used to get the job done from a sports science perspective.
Yeah.
So now it's like, wait, how am I supposed to you want a full-time coder guy plus someone who's like,
Right.
um, but that's neither here nor there. So what I think is interesting next is I saw this tweet. I think it was yesterday. It said, when people get into coaching at first, it's like, oh, I'm not doing it for the money. I'm doing it for the kids, right, or the
Yeah.
athletes. And then it's like 3 years later, it's like I burn out. I make no money. I'm not appreciated. All these things. So as I'm kind of at an interesting fork for other reasons, but coaches, this podcast is sponsored by Samson Equipment. They've been providing elite strength training equipment and professional weight room solutions since 1976. If you value quality products, great customer service, and a company with integrity, then make Samson Equipment your go-to. Visit them at samsonequipment.com, that's SAMSON Equipment, and let them know that Matt Tometz sent you. ISOFIT is not just pioneering isometric strength training, but they are opening up a brand new world of possibilities with health and performance benefits through isometric training and their own groundbreaking product. With patented force matching technology, they're reshaping the boundaries of functional health and human performance. Discover the future of health, fitness, and sports performance at isofit.com. That's ISOFIT.com. phit.com, and tell them that Matt Tometz sent you. What was that first kind of moment that it hit you? Or do you have any advice of like people that are like, this is not it, and I'm starting to realize it? So like if someone is going to do some soul searching themselves, or they've had those thoughts, or they have this feeling of like, I don't know what it is, but like kind of what advice, if any, would you have to give to someone to kind of start evaluating or exploring some of those thoughts and feelings about coaching?
Yeah, that's an enormous question. And I think it took me the better part of a year to answer it for myself. I think it was not just one sporadic day where you're up at
X-ray tech, I'm out.
yeah, I mean, I was like, dang, I have a kinesiology background. Like I understand bones a little bit. Like, what can I do? Um, like you, I think the biggest portion for me, which I absolutely have so much respect and admiration for the strength and conditioning industry, like all of the performance team, but strength and conditioning is awesome. Like it's something that I wholeheartedly believe in a oversimplified way. It's preventative medicine for these high performing athletes. Like athletes get hurt, but frail, uncoordinated, unstable athletes are going to get hurt more. So like these people are the front lines in keeping your career healthy and your performance high. So like I absolutely love every avenue of strength and conditioning and what it stands for. Um, but the difficulties were just like when I realized when I started feeling more, I guess, frustration towards my athletes for them just not knowing things. Like I was their resource to help them to get them in the best position possible. And when you tell someone to get their hips up on a side plank for the 18th time,
Yeah, it
it's
gets
like
old.
it gets old, but like they're there to learn and receive instruction, and I'm there to give instruction. And I just found myself being frustrated for their lack of caring. But at the end of the day, it was my insecurities, like just being frustrated at having to do the same thing over and over and over again. Um, and that's like big picture. That's when I noticed myself like, oh, this might not be a job for me long term. Because it's great when they come into the room and they're giving you high fives and they like the music you're playing and the one thing I did write about in my reflections on your question is the most rewarding portion was when I left, which was really sad to me. Like all these athletes come and they express their gratitude and their appreciation and how you touch their lives. When you sign the like letter of resignation, when you're like, hey, I'm done, then that's when all the appreciation came
Yeah,
flooding
it's
in.
a weird, yeah.
Yeah, so if you're an athlete, tell your strength coach you love them every day.
Yeah.
So big picture, that element where I felt frustrated more than I did, like I felt more like a drain than I did a fountain. And then the second capacity, I was just like looking forward in my career in regards to like compensation and a work-life balance. Like I thought, oh, I could be a high-level strength conditioning coach at a good school in the NCAA for baseball, or make it to the professionals as a strength conditioning coach. And then I kind of projected the job security to be a little bit not tangible, but like malleable. If you go to a high level NCAA baseball program and the head coach gets dismissed, it's like the whole program can crumble in that capacity. And I didn't have the desire to job hop to job hop to job hop to moving around the country with my girlfriend and our cat. Like that just didn't seem, yeah, it
The
didn't
important
seem,
things.
yeah, literally. Like you have to decide what's your life and like what's your professional life. And I made the tough decision to like get away from the coaching role, which was so challenging for me because I love the connection. I love refining cues. I love programming. I love like all the capacities of that profession and of that position. But logistically, when you see your paycheck, you're like, man, this isn't what I studied for, and this isn't what my passions like align with.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting, especially this past year at Northwestern, and also a big light bulb from my end of my time at TC Boost. Just my old mentor Steve Breitenstein, who was with me and Mike at TC Boost, was like, no one is going to care as much about your session about as you do, you know? And it's
Right.
like maybe there's a college kid who's home for the summer who's studying exercise science who's a little bit interested, but then like at Northwestern where it's like they don't even have any majors relative to S&C, and I brought that up to our staff at Northwestern. It's like, yeah, because these kids are all smart, you know? It's like, do you think people are going to waste their Northwestern degree on exercise science or kines? Like,
Uh,
probably not, you know?
uh,
Um, so I think it's like you're expected to give your heart and soul and go above and beyond, right? For like poor pay, poor hours, all those things. And of course, like it is a super rewarding field. There are good
right.
setups. Yeah, I'm just like reflecting and comparing and contrasting. But then it's like, you know, the especially at TC Boost, where it's like they have school, they have their sport practice, they're gonna go get private lessons, and then maybe they'll squeeze you in once or twice a week. And
Yeah.
it's more or less that kind of same priority, um, kind of anywhere. You know, it's like obviously the student athletes have class in college, but then practice, and then the coach has to get their 20 hours in because they call the shots, you know? So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
you're supposed to give everything, but then accept just like being the last priority of like literally everyone else. Um, but when you do get that appreciation, you know, it is super rewarding, especially in things that are a little bit more one-on-one, like return and play and things like that.
Yeah. Right.
Um, but it is a weird balancing act. But the last thing I want to bring up is the trade-off of like I'm young, reckless, bachelor, all those things where it's like, okay, cool. I can like give all my stuff into the work bucket because I don't really have or have those other things that are objective, kind of bigger than myself, like a partner, like a cat, or a dog. But now as I get a little bit older, now my parents aren't here anymore. They're in Iowa with my brother. So it's like, oh, well, now like I want weekends, like one weekend a month to go see them, one every 6 weeks, kind of things like that, where it's like part of reflecting is like understanding that you're not going to have everything. So it's like, what am I willing to give up? You know,
Exactly.
it was fine when
Exactly.
I was on campus 7 days a week in Northwestern because every Sunday night I would just drive 30 minutes and go watch football with my parents. It was great, you know? And
Right.
I,
Right.
and I literally had the
Different
same
time in your
thought,
life.
like if the University of Iowa hired me, shout out Bill. Hey Bill, if you're listening. Um, it's like, yeah, I could be on campus 7 days a week because I could go get dinner with my brother on Tuesdays and watch football with my family on Sundays and do all the things that I want, you know? So I think it's just like putting up on a board of like seeing family, being able to do things like I have softball tonight. I played beach volleyball yesterday, you know, versus how much money am I making versus all these things. And it's kind of like just ranking them and saying, what am I willing to give up? I think is an easier way to kind of maybe wrap your head around it. And if you're visual like me, like literally write that out, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And that
That's
might be a good
powerful.
place to start for someone.
Yeah, definitely.
So next, last on this, um, is can we go through some of that journey of deciding to make that switch over? So I know that you said you intentionally sought out some sports science responsibilities with the football team, and then what that was like going through the interview process, looking for the sports science jobs, making your GitHub and your portfolio, and kind of self-teaching. So kind of the things that we chatted about on the phone the first time. So if we could kind of go through some of the specifics and the tangibles of plotting your transition from coaching to sports science.
Yeah. Yeah. So that originated in grad program, like as a graduate assistant, and I alluded to it earlier, just doing data collection with our force plates and our jump monitoring. I was like, oh, this is a uh, accessible way to collect data for these athletes and for me to make decisions. And it I think a shortcoming of sports science that I learned really on is that when you collect data and then don't do anything with it, you feel guilty for wasting time. But like just like every other practice, you have to learn what to do and what not to do, and good ways to do things. Um, so getting to I did that and I was messing with Excel and Google Sheets and following Adam Virgil's videos on YouTube, just like making dashboards and being obsessed with the computer side of things. was fortunate enough to get the position at UC Davis. And it was like this during this, gosh, what is it called? The industrial revolution of technology at that school. We were getting this big old new building, and we just came across all these technologies. We got force decks, we got Nord boards, we got 1080 sprints. So like we got all these things, and I slowly started making myself valuable in the capacity of like changing data into decision making. I remember a really early on one was daily wellness questionnaires for the entirety of the football team. So you got 100 guys. You have what, 4 or 5 position groups on each side of the ball,
Jeez.
or maybe 3. And my boss gave me he's like, hey, we have all this data. Can you present this to the coaching staff in a visually appealing and accessible way? I was like, yeah, like let me get to it. And I was tinkering with all the colors and all the fonts, and he's like, yep, looks great. Let's do it. Um, so I was able to get that wellness data and make a little dashboard, and you can change the stamina or the hydration or the sleep quality, and you can see all the graphs go up and down and the 5-day
Love it.
trend.
Love
So
it.
starting easy things there, like those guys send, or the company we're using gave you a CSV and you just ran with it. So started small, and then once we like got over this calendar year, when a new season started, we ended up doing jump monitoring with our with like big players, guys with a lot of playing time in each of those individual position groups, like jumping 2 quarterbacks, 2 wide receivers, 2 linemen, 2 this X, Y, and Z, to kind of guide decision making in the programming volume that those jumps and those acute increases or decreases were brought to the coaching staff of the football team, not through me, through my boss, who was the director of football performance there. I started to feel the momentum. I was like, okay, people care about these things that we can measure, and somebody needs to do it. There needs to be someone like going and telling a guy, or printing out a list and saying, hey, we need these guys to jump. Go find them in the weight room when there's 100 guys lifting and there's music blaring, and being able to communicate what we're doing and why we're doing it. Because like I said earlier, if an athlete knows you're wasting their time, they're like, dude, what are we doing? Like, I have class, I have to eat, I have to lift, I have to do all this. So seeing that momentum on the force plate jumps and communicating that with the performance staff, I was like, okay, this is cool. I like this. And that's where I just started seeing the capacity of what this profession looks like. I mean, the CPSS is out at this point. And I was like, oh, you can get a job in performance, in sports, that revolves around computers and data-driven decision making. So I started making that portfolio, did the Google Data Analytics professional certificate through Coursera.
Rock on.
Yeah, rock on, good program. And just dabbling in things that I was interested in, and just like I think that is an underlying non-negotiable, is like you have to love it and you have to be obsessed with performance and refining your process. Last little piece to this is we were also doing hamstring monitoring for some of our high-speed running guys at UC Davis, and we had to refine our testing modality, or our testing procedure, to get a little bit more validity. Excuse me. We had some of our lighter guys. We were doing a Nordboard ISO 30, which is just knees bent 30 degrees angle. They're pretty much in push-up position, and they're driving into those Nordboard hooks as hard as they can. We had lighter guys that were able to concentrically bring themselves up. We wanted an isometric test to measure neurological readiness and hamstring fatigue unilaterally and bilaterally. And we had guys that are like 175 and they were able to bring themselves up. So like 6 weeks in, we're like, we need to change something here. So we weighed them down with dumbbells, and that was like the new part of our procedure. And that was through conversations with the whole performance staff. We're like, do we does this seem like an efficient way to collect this data since we came under this new problem of our practice? And so I just like that. I like improving, and I like communicating those messages, and being able to connect with the guys. Like, this is for you. Like, we really want to take care of you, and we're doing this and trying to make the best decisions possible.
I think with that example, as I've said multiple times myself, it's like I'm only a good sports scientist because I know what it's like in real life,
Yeah,
and I know what it's like having good, or I know what it's like to ask good questions because I know the end result, right? And of
yeah,
course, like someone in a lab with only two participants with all the time in the world and all these things versus like you have 100 guys that have class
hmm,
that have no idea of why they're jumping with their hands on their hips, twice, and things like that. But on the flip side, like I'm also a better coach because I understand reliability, the scientific method. Oh, if I know what tests I want to run, well then I know how to collect it. So it's a little bit more organized because there's nothing like when you have all of your data and it's just organized a little bit differently than it should be. It's like, oh man, if only I knew, you know?
right, right. Going
So that
backwards.
that if they go hand in hand, or it's like I've worked with 9-year-olds in a field for an hour, and I've also published my thesis in JSCR. And both of
Yeah,
those things make me better at each respective thing, you know?
right, right.
So I think, yeah, if you have real and like the best I ever got at Excel was when my boss at TCU left 3 weeks before the beach volleyball season started,
Hmm.
and I had like heart monitors, daily wellness, and SRPEs, and nowhere to like house it all. So I just had to
Yeah,
figure it out, you know.
right.
Um, so I guess I'll bring this full circle to our last question on this of someone who doesn't have that background in computer science, right? Like I know formulas, I know functions, I know Excel, but like coding and it's like, yes, I understand that there's a function and you know what you want to do and all these things. But going from that into like a literal portfolio that like professional MLB teams are like, oh, this is like pretty solid. This guy must know what he's doing.
Right.
So if someone's thinking about diving down the coding rabbit hole, as I probably have as many have done Coursera's as probably the next strength coach who's interested in data. So if someone wanted to dive into the actual coding side, what would you recommend for them to do?
Yeah, I think that you bring up a good point where it's like this wasn't our degree. Like, we didn't have, I mean, I think I did SPSS, which is like a statistical software
Mhm.
for one assignment one time in
Yeah,
my
I had that in
grad.
grad school. I only
Yeah,
took one stat class my freshman year of college, and then I was like good at math, so I tested out. And then I
yeah,
took one stat class in grad school. That was it. I took 2 math classes in 6 years of college, you know?
right. So it's like a shot in the dark for us. We can program for 6 hours straight, but like type in an Excel code, you're missing one comma. You're like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Um, Big picture, I think you have to work backwards in this like project, in this mindset. It's like you have to have a goal in mind, and then figure out how to do that with the computer's assistance. So I think a foundation in math and some capacity of statistics is irreplaceable. Like, I think maybe the easiest example, and a lot of people are familiar with, is going to be the jump monitoring. So like, you as a sports scientist or an aspiring sports scientist or a strength coach who's interested in it, it's like, I want to be able to make decisions with my athletes' counter movement jump data that I collect daily. So you start with Vald or whatever company that you're working with, and you see their data structure. You go, I can export CSVs, or I have to type this all naturally into my Excel formula. Like, you have to work through whatever avenue you collect the data from, and then backwards. Um, and there's, just like learning a Spanish or a French or like any other language, you have to learn the intricacies of this. And I think a shortcoming that I had was trying to learn a bunch of different coding languages at first. So I was like, oh, R's great. Oh, Python's great. Oh, I can do HTML stuff for my portfolio. I would have concentrated on one at first to learn the basics of that one. Um, so knowing your end goal, realizing that you don't need to be like a master of this thing. Like you're not going to be a perfect computer scientist, because that's not what we went to school for. And realizing that it's going to be challenging and a bit slow, with the infinite resource that is the internet, that is YouTube. You can learn absolutely anything.
It's
So
insane.
it's absolutely insane. There's infinite resources for you out there. So you have to have that end goal in mind. You have to realize it won't be hard. But we talked about it briefly. Like, you have to be obsessed with it and like want to learn how to do it, because you're so interested in that end goal. And I think that's how you have to approach it. If you want to learn something, you can. You could probably learn to be a mechanic or an X-ray technician, like online on YouTube. So many people have done it. You got to work towards doing it, and it's gonna take forever, or not forever, but like you'll have a lot of oops and jumps. Like, you'll miss a lot of commas in those formulas at first.
All these random error messages. ChatGPT, what does it mean?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So I think whether it's like the scientific method or learning a skill, it's like, well, what is my question or end goal, or I want to come to this conclusion? And it's like, okay, well, what do I need to kind of make that happen?
Yeah.
And that's why like all my Coursera's were half done, is because I was just like consuming the information, and I was like, this is cool. But that's why I got really good at Excel, because I had a real life problem and a deadline, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I think just to have real life data and then a real life question, and then you kind of go from there and guess and check. I feel like
Yeah.
that's the best way to learn.
Yeah. Let your passions guide you. And um there's the significant point is like, yeah, exactly that. You want to have a real goal in mind, because it could be as easy as two Excel formulas, or it could be as difficult as uh, an R file with 10 hours of chat GPT. You have to access all these different databases. So like you need to work backwards for sure.
Fantastic. So next we will move on. What is the coolest, craziest story? So basically the one you kind of couldn't make up if you tried, from your career so far in this wild field that we're in.
Yeah, yeah. Two examples for you. I have an S&C one and a sports science one. uh Sports science, or excuse me, S&C. I think just being in the football environment as a lifelong baseball guy at UC Davis, I just thought, for the year roughly that I was working with the program, I was just amazed how impressive of an orchestra that sport science or that sport performance was, and the training for it was. It was just amazing. The craziest story that we had a running back. This was like, I was so new at this point, probably 3 or 4 months in, and I never saw anyone squat over like 405. And we had a running back going for 6 plate back squat. It might have been 7, but my
Holy
recollection
crap. How much did he
tells me
weigh?
6. Yeah, absolute monster. Um, and I was responsible for his rack. So we have the guy on the right, the guy on the left, the guy behind, and like the coach being the verbal spotter, I guess. And he goes to take it off, and no one noticed that one plate was missing.
Uh-oh.
So he goes to take it off. The loudest noise. We were in like this little barn that had 8 racks, and it just weights smashing down. The clips were old, so stuff was sliding off. The guy was completely okay. He was totally fine, but it was just like a moment of silence. Everyone was just stunned at what happened. And I was new. I was like, this is a very difficult situation to explain. Like, there's 600 pounds slamming on the ground, and thankfully everyone was okay. So that was my crazy S&C story. And then coolest sports science story is hands down just like walking into spring training for the first time this season. Being a lifelong baseball fan, and seeing how that process is so efficient at the professional level, and honestly like being starstruck by guys like Jose Ramirez, like watching him on TV my whole life, and then going to see him walk by and foam roll and stuff is so cool. They really take care of staff and athletes there, and it was just so cool. Like, everyone was so nice and happy to be there. And that's a core memory for me as a sports scientist for sure.
I bet. Yeah, it's funny how specific this field is. So going to a bunch of baseball games and being from Chicago, first off, Cubs fans are annoying. Please clip this, aka me, clip that because it's freaking true. Cubs fans are annoying. And the cell, or where the Sox play, or I guess it's called Guaranteed Rate Field, anyways, it's just like in the South Side, it's far. The Sox aren't good. So I've been to more Brewers games than I have Cubs games.
Wow. Yeah.
And we're also a Cardinals family, anyways. So going to all these games, I try to like find the strength coach, And it's pretty
Yeah.
obvious. It's the one guy who's out with the players. He probably has like a band or two. And
Yeah.
and I had the Brewers head strength coach for 12 years on my podcast. I met him at a conference. And I'm like, dude, I've like found you on the field and been like, that'd be so cool if I could do that one day. And now he's like on my podcast and we're like buddies, I
Right.
guess. It's just like so
Full
crazy. So
circle.
I can only imagine what it's like being there live, you know?
Yeah, really, really powerful moment for me. Just asking every domain, every question I could. It's just so cool to be around a group of people that are like locked in.
It's a little different going from the private side and those 9, 10, 11-year-olds. And then you have guys, at least at Northwestern, that are like trying to and will get drafted, that
Yeah.
like almost ask too many questions, like, oh, like pump the brakes a little bit, like all you need is some rest and things like that, versus like, dude, tell your parents to save your money. Like you should not be training,
Right.
Like
Right.
you're great, but also not great at the same time. Um, yeah, I can only imagine. I can only imagine. That's cool. So last, what is the biggest full circle moment? So basically, what took multiple years maybe after the fact to
Mm.
kind of come back around and you realize it's like, oh, that happened how it should, or I'm glad it did this way versus in the moment I wanted to turn out something different, or an athlete coming back, or basically something that took a little bit of time to kind of develop and kind of come back around.
Yeah. Full circle, I think for me personally is going to be like the short but such meaningful, or like so meaningful and enjoyable time as a strength conditioning coach. Like pretty much from like 22 to 26 years of age, I was coaching my heart out, like absolutely loving it. And like I mentioned earlier, like going through two different school systems where you have to leave. And at the end of the day, like the kids are just so appreciative of you. And then you go, oh, my hard work of my degree and my experience and uh, my processes and procedures like through that I've learned and failed with uh, come full circle to help those young people out, and they tell you at the end, and that feels real good. Um, and on the sports science side of things, it's like those 4 years of coaching um, just were so powerful to be to have the domain expertise, like you mentioned earlier. It's like you can't be a computer guy that has never been in a weight room, and you can't be a weight room guy that's never been on the computer. So you gotta be both of those. And I was fortunate enough to uh, have so many reps and having so many smart people to tell me to give me advice on things and push me in a direction that ultimately worked for me. And full circle, I get to be in my trifecta that I love. So it's just like so great.
How much would you attribute you seeking out things, like let's
Mm,
say doing the Google certificate versus like um, the head S&C coach coming up to you and saying, "Hey, can you present on this?" So you
yeah,
seeking out things versus kind of just being around and being there and being live, and then things kind of coming to you. How would you kind of break down both of those opportunities?
I think the element of you have to have the desire to answer your own questions first. So like the desire to answer my own questions first with the data that I had access to, like gave me the end goal to learn how to do all of it. Like you have the question, and then you have the numbers that you are interested in looking at. And if you don't know how to code or manipulate these files or transform these data sets, like the end goal is impossible. So personally, if you want to go do it, you have to seek out these opportunities yourself. You have to YouTube how to do this in Excel, how to do this in Excel, how to make these charts. That's like a non-negotiable that I think prepared me for when the opportunity arose with a head coach. So like you maybe, for example, if you want to be able to speak Spanish in a Spanish speaking country, you can't just go there and wing it with no preparation. But you're like, oh, I love Spanish. I'd love to learn more about it and how I can use it to help people. But you have to like have the forethought to go and learn these things yourself. And then when the time arises to help in a real practical environment, you can do it. And so I think that's the perspective I take. And those opportunities were like not crystal clear as well. It's like, hey, can you do this data thing? I was like, yes. And then unfortunately, overpromise and maybe undeliver a little bit on the timeliness of things. It's like, oh, I could do this. And then it's like 3 days straight of 6 hours of computer work at home because you're like, oh, I'm so close. I'm so close. I can do it. Um, I think that breaks it down. It's like you have to have the passion to do it by yourself, and then when the opportunity comes, absolutely dominate it and like show people that, hey, this is what I did, and here maybe some of my shortcomings that we could talk about.
Yeah, I think it's can you develop enough skills beforehand on your own initiative
Yeah,
to not mess up the opportunity? You know, so it's like obviously the best you can ever get at Spanish is like going to a speaking country to have to speak it, but it's like if you don't even know basic conjugations and you
yeah,
don't know basic like verbs and nouns and things like that, well then yeah, of course you're gonna flop when you go out there, you know?
yeah, yeah,
So it's basically, can you accumulate enough skills to where you can actually do the opportunity?
yeah,
Because I always say it's a push and a pull, and you can't get pulled if you don't push first. So basically, do what you can when you can, and if you're passionate about it and you're interested, then you'll be ready for those opportunities, I guess. If I
yeah,
had to try
yeah,
to sum it up.
absolutely. I think to add on that is like a lot of people in the performance environment, I'm overgeneralizing, but they're not interested in the data until there's a question that they want to solve. So like if you bring like the performance staff all these little tidbits of info, they're like, "Oh, that's helpful. Like, thank you, appreciate it." But when there's a problem that they have been asked to solve and you can lead them to that, like that is where your value starts to sink in. They're like, "Oh, this guy can actually do these things that are helpful to me and to the staff above me, if that makes sense. Like the value, the big value piece, and you can't do that unless you've learned the skills on the back end that usually take time to develop.
Mm. Yeah, no, I think it's having that background and the interest, but then real life stuff to kind of make it happen. So
Absolutely.
I've had bits and pieces of that in my own life, but cool that you said, "Hey, this is a great field. Here's what I like. Here's what I don't like. Oh, well, here's a pivot that might make sense, and then here's what I can do. Here's a controllable kind of in the meantime."
Yeah.
So very cool journey. Very glad that we got connected way back when, um, and that I didn't talk you to sleep in that first phone call, and that you were more than willing to kind of hop on this pod. So I want to say thank you very much for your time, and now I want to roll out the red carpet for you. Anything else that you want to put out there? Shamelessly plug. Emphasis on shameless. And basically, where can people get more of you if they want to learn more?
Yeah, of course, Matt. Thank you so much. I mean, it's just, I feel like we could sit and talk for such a long time just about everything and nothing simultaneously.
That's the best.
Yeah, great field. Big picture, strength coaches, sports scientists, everyone just go and try to learn and be as valuable as a resource as you can to athletes and And if you're passionate about it, go full throttle into it and don't hold back. To get more of me, honestly, like you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I have such a passion to communicate what I've gone through and what I've learned and my failures and my successes to anyone. Like reach out to me, shoot me a message and chat and I'll give you an honest answer.
Fantastic. So it's just Trevor Abshire, like it'll be in the title of this podcast and
Yeah,
stuff.
with the mustache.
That's how you know. That's how you know. I was like, man, I hope that's a current picture-ish. So he has the
Yeah,
mustache, and my dreams came true. So
I know.
today's gonna be a good day. I can already tell. So thank you very much again for your time, and I look forward to staying in touch and probably chatting for another hour once we stop recording. So
Yeah. Thanks, Matt. Rock and roll.